Chapter 1. Our heroine's adventures begin. If you had known Catherine Morland as a young child, you would never have imagined that one day she would be the heroine of a novel filled with adventure, mystery, and romance. Her father was a respected clergyman, neither rich nor poor, and her mother was a strong, sensible mother of 10 children. The Morlands were often described as a fine family, but that was because there were so many of them, not because any of them were handsome, beautiful, or noticeably talented. For the first 10 years of her life, Catherine was as ordinary as the rest of the Morlands. She was thin and clumsy, with dull skin and hair. She spent her time throwing a ball, riding a horse, or chasing her brothers and sisters, while avoiding any ladylike activities, like arranging flowers, nursing a poor injured pet, or watering a pretty rose bush. And certainly Catherine's education could not be described as appropriate for a heroine. In fact, she had an obvious dislike for the classroom, and never could learn or understand anything before she was taught. Occasionally, she even seemed rather stupid. Her mother wanted her to learn music, and Catherine was sure she would like to play the piano, so at 8 years old she began lessons. But she soon gave up, and the day on which the music teacher was dismissed was one of the happiest days of her young life. Her drawing ability was also disappointing. Although she enjoyed drawing animals, all her pictures, from chickens to horses, looked very similar. What a strange, incomprehensible character. Incomprehensible because, in spite of such clear signs of a difficult nature, Catherine was seldom unpleasant. She rarely quarrelled, and was very kind to her 6 younger brothers and sisters, and quite friendly with the 3 older ones. But it still must be admitted that she was untidy, noisy, and wild, and loved nothing better than rolling down her favourite hill at the back of the house. At 15, Catherine's appearance began to improve. Her skin was brighter, her hair was shinier and nicely styled, her eyes shone, and her figure was pleasing. Her love of dirt was replaced by an interest in the latest fashions, and in the possibility of going to a ball. She was quite thrilled one day to hear her father remark on her personal improvement. "Catherine is almost pretty today." To be almost pretty is a great prize to a girl who has been plain for 15 years. Catherine had never been interested in books full of facts and useful knowledge, but from the age of 15 she began to read the type of books which heroines must read. Stories of romance, adventure, and fantasy, set in mysterious foreign places. These supplied her memory with useful instructions about life, death, and especially love. And although she could not write poetry or play the piano or paint a picture, achievements we might expect in a heroine, she began nevertheless to admire those skills in others. At the beginning of our story, Catherine was 17 and eager for life. But the world around Fullerton, the village in Wiltshire where the Morlands lived, did not offer the kind of adventure and romance that a heroine needs. Luckily for Catherine, Mr. Allen, the gentleman who owned most of the property around Fullerton, was required by his doctor to go to the city of Bath for a healthy rest. His wife, a good-natured woman with no children of her own, was very fond of Catherine. She understood that a young lady of 17 is ready to take her place in society, so she invited our heroine to accompany her and Mr. Allen to Bath for the season. When the time came for Catherine's first trip away from home without her family, You can imagine the excitement and anxiety in the Morland household. Would Mrs. Morland warn her daughter about the evils of city life and the dangers of mixing with the wrong sort of gentleman? Would her father generously hand her a blank cheque to cover every need? Would the sister closest to her in age insist that she write to her every day and tell her every detail of her life in Bath? Well, no. This, after all, was an ordinary family from rural England. Mrs. Morland simply said, "Catherine, please remember to wear your warm scarf around your throat when you are out in the evening." Mr. Morland gave Catherine a small purse with £10 and promised more if it was needed. Catherine's sister Sarah shouted goodbye as she ran out to meet a friend. In fact, the family had not realised that Catherine was going to be a heroine. They cheerfully but quietly sent her off without any dramatic speeches, tears, or warnings. The trip to Bath was both calm and safe. The carriage was not stopped by robbers or by stormy weather, nor were the passengers lucky enough to meet a hero before arriving at their destination. But when they arrived in Bath, Catherine felt happy immediately. Her eyes were here, there, everywhere, as the carriage drove through the pretty streets. Soon Mr. and Mrs. Allen and Catherine were settled in comfortable lodgings in Pulteney Street. And what do we know about Mrs. Allen, Catherine's close companion and chaperone for the coming weeks? She was the type of woman who amazes us by finding a husband. Why would any sensible gentleman like Mr. Allen want a wife without beauty, intelligence, achievements, or a pretty manner? Well, she was generally quiet, did not concern herself with his business, and agreed with his opinions on every topic. In addition to these qualities, Mrs. Allen had two special interests that kept her busy and made her a suitable person to introduce a young lady into society. First, she loved going out, and never chose to stay quietly at home. Second, she found endless pleasure in fashion. She would not consider taking Catherine to any of the stylish rooms in Bath until they had both bought new dresses in the latest style. When they were ready to attend their first ball, Mrs. Allen declared that Catherine looked exactly as she should. Such admiration was always very welcome when it came, but Catherine did not depend on it. Nevertheless, on this evening, it made her confident enough to face any crowd of strangers. When they entered the ballroom, Mr. Allen escaped to a side room to play cards with a group of husbands. Meanwhile, the two ladies looked around a very full ballroom, and, with Catherine holding her chaperone's arm rather desperately, they struggled through the crowd. They finally found a place on a balcony at the top of the long room with a good view of the company below them. It was a splendid sight, and Catherine began, for the first time that evening, to feel that she was really at a ball. She hoped to dance, but did not know anyone in the room, and Mrs. Allen did not see anyone she knew either. "Surely I should see a familiar face soon. I wish I could find a partner for you," remarked Mrs. Allen. Catherine had no time to worry about dancing, because before long everyone began to move towards the tea tables. But Catherine and Mrs. Allen were at a distinct disadvantage, without a party of friends to join, or a polite gentleman to assist them. After being pushed and squeezed by the crowd, they finally found 2 empty places at the end of a long table, where a large group was already seated. The 2 ladies were ignored, and left with no one to speak to except one another. "Well, I am very pleased that I have not damaged my new dress in this terrible crowd, I assure you. It would have been shocking to have it torn, wouldn't it? Said Mrs. Allen. I must say that I have not seen one dress in the whole room that I prefer to mine. It is very uncomfortable with no friends here, don't you think? Whispered Catherine. What shall we do? The gentlemen and ladies at this table do not look happy with us here. We seem to be forcing ourselves into their party. Yes, it is very disagreeable, said Mrs. Allen. My good friends the Skinners would rescue us if they were here now. Shouldn't we leave? There are no cups or plates for us here, you see, Catherine said with a worried frown. I think we should sit still, said Mrs. Allen. We shall be pushed and pulled in every direction if we try to find another place in this crowd. My dress could easily be damaged. Mrs. Allen, are you sure there is nobody that you know in this great assembly of people? You must know somebody. Oh, if only I could see a familiar face, Mrs. Allen said. Oh, look, there goes a strange-looking woman. What an odd old-fashioned dress. Look at the back of it. How awful. After some time, the two ladies received a polite offer of tea from one of their neighbours at the table. They accepted gratefully, and enjoyed a little light conversation with the gentleman. But that soon ended, and no one else spoke to them during the entire evening. When the dancing came to an end, Mr. Allen found Catherine and his wife. "Well, Miss Morland," he said, "I hope you have had an agreeable ball?" "Very agreeable indeed," Catherine replied politely, trying unsuccessfully to hide a great yawn. As the ballroom began to empty, and the crowd grew smaller, our heroine had a better opportunity to be admired. In her hearing, two gentlemen commented on her to one another. "There's a pretty girl. Where was she all evening?" Such words had a strong effect. Catherine immediately thought that the evening had been very pleasant. Perhaps an experienced heroine would expect more, but Catherine left the ball perfectly satisfied with her share of public attention.